We just have a moment in this program to acknowledge a particular person and the unique and specific role that they have played in bringing this energy-filled community together. And so to do that, I'd like to ask my colleagues, Cecilio and Marla, and your colleagues, Cecilio and Marla, to join me. Do you guys want to come over here on this side? And this is right here. I have been given the great privilege of speaking on behalf of the 2019 RISE organizing team and steering committee. And in doing that, we'd like to invite President Avedon Rodriguez to join us on the stage. You guys want to stand in the front? Over here? President Rodriguez, the RISE 2019 team, and I'm sure all of those gathered here with us, would like to take a moment to recognize your leadership and the enormous contributions to the RISE community. As Marla says, you are an incredible human being. We take this moment to present you with a small reminder of the leadership role you have played in bringing this wonderful community of people together. 160 institutions and organizations brought together here at UAlbany, my alma mater, so I'm a little biased. It's a wonderful place. You brought us here together for this amazing beginning. For this, we celebrate you and make as a final comment on this small ceremony, sir, you are a catalyst for change. Thank you so much. You may, sir, you may.
Good afternoon, everyone, and muy buenas tardes. And first and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for still being here. After 3 days and a half, you are still here. You are still engaged. Your commitment, your passion is heartfelt, and I thank you for that. On behalf of the University at Albany, we sincerely appreciate it. And we are deeply honored that you have chosen to be here with us at the University at Albany. You know, I, as the 20th president of this great university, have the distinct honor and pleasure, really, of standing up here and thanking you. But it is not I who should be recognized. It's all the great people that have made this possible. It's all the leadership across the 100+ universities and organizations, federal, state, local organizations, universities and colleges, community organizations, the media, all of you, our amazing co-chairs. You are the ones that made this possible. We simply said, this is your home, this is your house, please enjoy it and make the most of it. And certainly this would never, ever be possible. It would be actually impossible without the amazing leadership and hard work of Vince Delio and his entire staff. So, We sincerely appreciate, again, everything that everyone has done here. And the question is, what are the next steps? How do we move forward to accomplish the goals, the ideals, the agenda that has been set forward here today? And how do we measure our success and our progress next year, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I truly and honestly believe that the change that we can accomplish can be transformational. Not only transformational for institutions of higher education, but transformational for our communities. And so again, it is part to be an integral part as a university of this great history that we are making together. I unfortunately, in the next 5 minutes, have to leave. I serve on a commission for the Middle States Accreditation Association, and they meet for 2 days. I skipped the day today to be here with you, but I have to be there for tomorrow. So once again, thank you for being here. I think that the next few hours are going to be critical in setting the agenda moving forward. So I wish you all the best in these deliberations and discussions. And as you prepare to travel across the country and to Puerto Rico and to Japan and elsewhere, I wish you all of the best. Feliz viaje. You know, in Spanish, sometimes we say, mi casa es su casa, my house is your house, but really, my house is not your house. My house belongs to the University Foundation, but I can yes say, mi hogar es su hogar. My home is your home. Thank you so very much, folks.
And enjoy your lunch. We'll be back at about 5 of 1. the moment you've all been waiting for. We now get to celebrate some achievements, some small, some quite significant, before we begin the luncheon plenary panel. So I've had the pleasure over the last few days to get to know and work with Elizabeth Allen. Liz, where are you? You, my friend, are the owner of a $100 Amazon card. I don't have it with me, but come on up, we'll take a picture. Vince has it, I hope, right? So you had the top tweet, and it was retweeted 73 times. Thank you very much. All right, we'll give you this. Oh, I think you should read it. That's a great idea.
All right, this is an incredible quote on the opening morning. Disasters don't create poverty and homelessness, but disasters do exacerbate these pre-existing issues. We have to rethink disaster research with a social justice orientation and bring a transdisciplinary framework to our work. So, not word for word, but that's why we're all here. So, I'll do something good with my Amazon money.
Yes. Marvelous. That's awesome. So we also have the opportunity to acknowledge 5 posters that received, okay, I'm going to ask you again, how many votes? How many votes do you think we got? More than 2,500. 3,560. If this was The Price is Right, my friend, you would be on the showcase of prizes. So I'm going to start with number 5. And maybe you guys didn't know this, but I'll remind you, and maybe I'll tell you for the first time if you didn't know, that we actually have cash prizes for these posters. So the 5th ranked prize, the fifth ranked poster will get $50, 4 $100, 3 $150, 2 $250, and the first place award will get a $500 cash award. Also from Vince. That's why he got the standing ovation. So I will start with the 5th ranked, and I'm going to try to make sure that I do this right. Number 5. There we go. Number 5, Ramon Melendez Garcia. Are you here? Ramon is from the Pontificia Universidad. I checked the names, but I didn't check the universities. Catholic University of Puerto Rico. Devastating sacrifice in communication darkness. If you're here, what we'll be doing with sorry, I'm trying to do 2 things at once. It's not working. What we'll be doing is having the award-winning posters right outside the door as you exit the room so that you will get to see them. Oh, I'm having trouble finding, oh, there it is. All right. Number 4. Number 4, Miguel Rodriguez Ramos. Are you here? Also from the Catholic University of Puerto Rico. Stand and be recognized. The Aftermath of Maria. Wonderful, wonderful work. Oh, so I have to remember, I can't see the mouse on my screen. I have to look up. Number 3, receiving a $150 award is a team from the University of Central Florida. Their poster displaced by disaster. I can't read, it's written over. And the Puerto Rico Research Hub, helping Puerto Ricans rise. Valerie Quinones, Pedro Rodriguez, Rebecca Sanchez, and Victor Sepulveda. Are any of them here? No? Let's give them a round of applause. I think our students are at class, as they should be. Okay, number 2. Number 2. I'm going to go like this. Now See if I can do two things at once. Okay, $250 prize for second-ranked poster receiving 127 votes, Eliot Santiago Rodriguez from, again, the Catholic University of Puerto Rico, Experiencing the Rebirth. Oh, I have to remember my technique. And number one, receiving 162 of the 3,500 votes, the face of Hurricane Maria. Emmanuel Mateo Aponte, also Catholic University of Puerto Rico, the face of Hurricane Maria. An absolutely wonderful, wonderful display of energy and insight and enthusiasm, heartbreak and concern from this wonderful group of students. So thank you so much for engaging with the posters and engaging with their ideas. The ranking posters will be displayed as you exit the room. In addition to awarding and acknowledging the contributions of these individuals, Liz for amplifying the message to social media, to our students for bringing these ideas and presenting them and sharing them with you. I've also been informed that one of us among you is also been recognized, and his voice will help carry the message forward. Dr. Pablo Menendez Lazaro, where are you, Pablo? Wave your hands, yes. Just today, was it today? Just today was appointed to part of the Climate Change Council in Puerto Rico. Pablo is from the University of Puerto Rico and now has this important opportunity to contribute to the council in Puerto Rico focused on climate change. So take the message forward. With that, it's my further privilege, as soon as I find the page, to introduce to you the moderator of our next panel, Dr. David Gomez, president of Ostos Community College. Ostos Community College is one of the two CUNY community colleges. Dr. Gomez has been leading that institution and since 2005, but has a very, very long history. I think you said 40 years in higher education, leading the charge on a variety of issues and topics, in particular the role of the community college. And I ask you to join me in welcoming him and his panel to the stage.
At the end of the day, I am Puerto Riqueño, so I hug a lot. Don't. Okay. Welcome, everyone. It is my distinct honor to serve as the moderator for this panel. As you heard, my name is David Gomez, or as my parents would call me, David. I am a proud U of Albany alum. I am glad that Avidan is not here because it would be a cringeworthy moment for him, I'm sure. I am also proud to be the president of Ostos Community College. Why I am here with such a distinguished group is beyond me, but I said to my colleagues earlier, I feel like I have won a seat at the cool kids table in the cafeteria. And when I introduce the panelists, you'll understand why. Our first panelist is Dr. Stephen Buckman. Stephen, if you would come forward. Dr. Buckman is Assistant Professor of Real Estate and Urban Planning at Clemson University and a partner with Design Strategies and Development Consulting. Presently, Dr. Buckman is engaged in research that examines how real estate developers are making their developments more resilient and sustainable in the face of climate change in Charleston, South Carolina. Join us in welcoming Dr. Buckman. Our second panelist, and I heard the phrase for the first time, Texas A&M 12th man, is Corey Arjak. Corey is a director of MCCLT, Jordan Institute for International Awareness at Texas A&M. You can come up, Corey, I don't bite. At least not normally. With a background in anthropology, the arts, and education, she serves as the Texas A&M campus and surrounding communities by providing international internships, service opportunities, and research support. For the past 10 years, working largely with colleagues and students, she has engaged in the creation, development, and implementation of interdisciplinary, intercollegiate, and cross-cultural service and community curriculum and programming. Welcome, Corey. She'll explain to you the whole 12-man reference a little later. I now would like to call up Dr. Jose A. Molina Cotto. Dr. Cotto is a full professor in the biology department of the University of Puerto Rico in Cayey. He has a PhD in biochemistry from Wayne State University School of Medicine and a postdoc from the University of Puerto Rico School of Medicine, yet another underachiever. During Hurricane Maria, Dr. Molina served as interim chancellor at the University of Puerto Rico in Cayey, leading the efforts to rebuild and restore administrative and academic activities. The reconstruction strategy used at Cayey was based on leadership empowerment and effective communication with institution employees who were totally committed and fostered community resiliency. Welcome, Dr. Molina. Next, we have someone who needs no introduction to this group, and Cecilio, in full disclosure, I was asked by the panelists, you have to be the last person to speak. So, prepárate. I promised I wouldn't do this, and I just can't help myself. Cecilio Ortiz Garcia is professor of political science at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. Yeah, you can give it up, show a little love. You've heard a lot about Cecilio so far, but briefly, in 2015, he co-founded the National Institute of Energy and Island Sustainability at the University of Puerto Rico. This institute is an interdisciplinary effort to connect all energy and sustainability-related research and development inside the UPR system in a convergence platform across its 11 campuses. I just like saying it because it sounds so cool. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Eric Stern, please come forward. A professor at the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity at the University at Albany. Dr. Stern holds a PhD from Stockholm University and a BA from Dartmouth College. He has published extensively in the fields of crisis and emergency management, crisis communication, resilience, security studies, executive leadership, foreign policy analysis, and political psychology. In addition to his scholarly work, Dr. Stern has collaborated closely with a wide range of U.S. and foreign government agencies, the European Union, and the OECD on a wide range of applied research and educational programming, including training and exercise development. So once again, please welcome our panel. Now, the title for today's, I believe it's referred to as an armchair discussion, is a conversation on advancing thinking regarding resiliency and governance of uncertainty, moving forward. As the great Bard once said, certainly he who gave us power to look fore and aft gave us not such power to fasten us unused. That's from Hamlet, by the way. I don't get to use my undergraduate English degree often enough. But that's our role today. We've spent some time looking back. Now it's an opportunity for us to look forward. And with that, I will launch into the first question for our panel. Hello. Hola, ¿cómo estás? Before I begin my questions, let us work clockwise, starting with you, Eric, and give you an opportunity just to make any opening comments that you would like to make.
Thank you, David. Coming this late in the conference, a lot of things have been said. but hopefully I can pick up a few threads that might be useful in advancing the conversation and perhaps filling some gaps. The title of the session emphasized the challenge of coping with uncertainty and risk and the governance challenges that are associated with that. And so my comments will reflect a little bit on those issues. One of the first works that really focused on the term resilience in the field of political science, public administration, was Aaron Wildavsky. He wrote a book that came out in '88, I think it was, called Searching for Safety. And one of the things that was interesting about that book was there was a recognition that we work in two ways to deal with risks. Some of them we recognize and we can mitigate them and head off and prevent. But we know that there are always things that happen that surprise us in various ways, that are unanticipated. And so we need to be able to also improvise and take a hit and bounce back. Nowadays, we would say even bounce forward is the aspiration that we want to have. Part of that, I think, is taking an all hazards perspective. We have been talking a lot and thinking a lot about the challenge of hurricanes, which are unbelievably destructive events, and our preparedness for them is perhaps not what it should be, and we need to do much more. I thought it was very healthy that President Orocho also was calling to our attention the fact that if we focus our attention on one type of hazard, another one, he mentioned earthquakes, but there are many more. It could be earthquakes, it could be space weather, that could have a very devastating effect on our infrastructure. Other things are going to get in the way. We need to have a preparedness that is broad enough that we can adapt to whatever is thrown at us. So I think that's the perspective that I bring to it. And if we prepare for a wide variety of things, then the things that we don't think about, we'll be able to manage them better. Second point that I'd like to make has to do with the international dimension. I am thrilled to see the national mobilization taking place, such a diverse set of actors trying to learn the lessons of Hurricane Maria, place those in the context of an emerging body of knowledge about risks and hazards and sustainability, and move forward. But I do think we also need to avoid not invented here syndrome. What is at stake in these discussions is so great that even our sadly rich and increasing national experience of these things may not be sufficient. We need to look at the challenges that other nations are facing, the creative solutions that they are developing, and bring those into our own attempts to be better and safer. Just a couple of fora that I think are particularly interesting. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has something called the High Level Risk Forum. Some years ago, 2014, the High Level Ministerial Group adopted a set of principles for risk governance that I reviewed them this morning. The report looks something like this, hard for you to see. It's worth downloading. It's just a couple of pages that really is a roadmap towards how developed countries, and I think it's relevant for developing countries as well, can work comprehensively across sectors, from local government to federal government, and integration with international organizations to do better. So that's the international piece. I also would strongly urge RISE to connect with some other regional and international networks that are doing parallel things. Some of my colleagues have been very involved in the Northern European Network for Emergency and Disaster Science, something like that, NEEDS. I have been involved in an international disaster research network that has brought together a number of Asian American and European actors. They're having a big meeting in Shanghai next summer that I think RISE should be connected to in some fashion. Third point, and I will be brief, I think we need to think differently about the way that we try to build preparedness in the country. FEMA has a strategy called, or one of the FEMA strategic goals is building a culture of preparedness. I had the privilege to participate in a study group that Wendy Walsh, who's here this morning, convened that wanted to take a hard look at culture. If you're going to build a culture of preparedness, what is culture? And so I was surrounded by a group of mostly anthropologists, of course, think a lot about culture. And one of the things that we discovered was that in our wonderful, diverse country, we don't have, well, we have a unitary culture in some sense, but we really have a mosaic of cultures and subcultures. And I'm going to anticipate and refer back to some of the things Cecilia was saying. Each of our regions and even communities within those regions has different patterns of strengths and vulnerabilities that are relevant to resilience. And a top-down cookie-cutter approach is just not going to work. So what we need to do is to adapt, to inform ourselves, to use culture brokers, to have a much better local understanding, and then I think we will do much better in the future. And finally, let me conclude by looking a little bit at higher ed and the role that we can play in this context. First of all, we need to get our own house in order. If we are going to help other people, we need to improve our own campus resilience. All universities and colleges are workplaces. Many of them are residential communities, tens of thousands of people, bigger than many other more formal types of towns and villages. And so we need to make sure that we are thinking about the risks that we face and how to make sure that student, faculty, and staff are safe. Once that's done, we need to be able to mobilize the power, the human capital, the know-how, the energy, the enthusiasm of our community, university community, to serve the wider community. Great examples from Puerto Rico, from Houston, from many other places where students have been able to contribute to response and recovery in important ways. And of course, finally, in terms of our educational mission, and we're thinking together about what next generation resilience education needs to look like, and our research makes us a font of potential expertise that can be mobilized. And so we need to do that, and we need to do that in ways that are scientifically rigorous and reflect the best of our disciplines, but also in ways that are responsive to the needs of the community, that are respectful of the knowledge of the practitioners and the citizens that we need to serve and work with. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for staying. This is great. For someone, I'm quite honored to be on this panel. For someone who was at the first RISE conference of 40 people, it's amazing to see how many people are here now. I mean, the growth is phenomenal. So hopefully next year will be even larger and we can get things really rolling. I want to open with a couple things. Something I've watched throughout the conference and stuff I do my own kind of work on is around narrative. Narrative is very important in how we structure things, how we talk about things. You know, one of the things, not to put them on the spot, but I will, Monday night's dinner, people from EPA and NOAA kept using this term customer. You know, we're not customers, you know, we're citizens. And that's a very different, and colleagues, and those are very different connotations. When you're a customer, it's a hierarchical structure, right? It's very much, we are handing out the dollars to you, you will be our, you know, people. It's not a collaborative experience. And so we need to change that, but it's also how we frame things of climate change in the community, and how we work with the community, and how we use these type of terms becomes very important. You know, it's kind of ironic for me to say this at a hazard conference. I have real problems with the term natural hazard, right? In the sense of, it's only hazardous because we've built things in areas, right? Like the fires in California, it's hazardous because homes are built in areas they probably shouldn't have been built in. So if we start looking at these things as natural occurrences and how we live in those natural occurrences, it takes a very different tone and way we look at the work that we do and how we go about doing it, right? So narrative is a big thing that I think will help drive how we look at this, what we do. Another thing is, we talk, most of us in here are academics or policy people of some sort, but we talk, and I brought this up in my cohort meeting, we talk a lot about stakeholders and we talk a lot about the community, but we don't, the stuff I'm seeing in the community is very much we going in and helping them and not the other way around, is what I've seen in this. And that's very important. And much of the work I do is I go in and I say, okay, you tell me what's going on, we work from that. And so I think we need to keep our eye on that and not be, and that also goes around to this idea of narrative as well, how we discuss it all. So I'll just close it there.
Hello, everyone. I am not Michelle Wyman, who is listed in your program. I am the 12th man, as Dr. Gomez mentioned. Quick story on that. 1921, E. King Gill, former student, Texas A&M University. We had a football game. The football team was not doing so well. And E. King Gill was told by the coach to stand on the sidelines, suited up, and be ready to go in. And from there on forward, he was never called into the game, but he was always standing on the sidelines, ready to go into the game. And so I jokingly quipped that I was the 12th man because I'm from Texas A&M University and I stepped in for Michelle. But what I would actually say with that is my student body is now considered the 12th man. So when the bonfire tragedy happened in 1999, when Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005, when we had Ike, when we had Rita, when we had Harvey, that student body mobilized with or without us, and they were standing on the sidelines waiting to go in, waiting for leadership, waiting for us, waiting for you, and waiting for me to make a stand and take a step forward. So I would ask each one of us to think about the 12th man and who are you? We've been called to be members of RISE by Michelle herself, and I wish she was on this stage because she's done so much work for this. But now I call you to be the 12th man, and not just to stand there, but to mobilize and move forward. Because I think that's the part. When Hurricane Maria happened for Texas A&M University, of course we were in the throes of Hurricane Harvey, but people were waiting, the students were waiting, saying, what are we gonna do, what are we gonna do, what are we gonna do? And it was the leaders that didn't know, therefore nothing happened. And I think that is a very sad, sad situation. And I mentioned this yesterday during my panel. Sometimes we sit around and we wait and we wait and we wait because we're waiting for someone, and that someone we're waiting for is ourselves. And that's what I would like to end with right now.
Hi, I would like to thank the committee for inviting me here. I don't know why I'm here, but I was chancellor 3 months before the hurricane, and I guess I forgot to read the small line, the most sentence. They indicate that it was a Hurricane 4 that I was going to be attending to. When I started at Calle, and hurricane was coming, I'm going to call T-2. That's where I divide my time in Calle. I found there was plans already set up for a Category Type 3 hurricane. That's what we're preparing for. But as some Prussian general once said, no plan survived the first contact with the enemy. So when hurricanes strike, I noticed that all the plans that we had before, even though the majority of them really work, were not prepared for a Type 4 hurricane. So I was thinking of how I'm going to address this audience, and I'm a professor, so I'm sorry, but I'm going to try to see you as my students. So I'm going to try to teach you something that eventually will be helpful for your future. The first question, I teach biochemistry, and biochemistry, as you know, is a set of reaction, metabolism, highly regulated, and highly integrated. So the first question I ask my student is, why a bullet kill us? Why just small fragment kill us? And they always come with the same, bleeding, damage. And the real reason is that that bullet, that small bullet, actually ripple to the whole system and eventually collapse. So one thing I noticed the 3 days I've been here, some people say, well, it happens in Puerto Rico, it happens in Bahamas, it happens in Houston, it happens. Even though it seems to be a small event, the ripple can destroy the whole system. So every single event has a greater consequence to all of us. So whatever we learn today from one event will be very helpful for the next one. Now, no plan is perfect. No plan will ever be perfect. So what we can do? Someone today said that we need cold-headed leaders and warm-hearted, something like that. I think I consider myself that kind of leader. Since no plan will survive the contact with the enemy, I think we should go back to the basics. And the basics is human behavior. Now, how many of you can drink milk? They are lactose tolerant. Raise your hand, please. Okay. I want you to picture this. 6,000 years ago, a baby was born. And that baby had a mutation. And that mutation went from him to his son, to his great son, to the great great son. And they were able to survive diseases, war, game, despair. And we are here all due to the resilience of our family, because everyone that raised their hand is my cousin. And we all come from a very resilient family that been here on earth more than 6,000 years. So that indicates that all of us in their gene have the resilience gene. It's a matter of fact to use it. And by the way, 30% of the human population only tolerate milk. We are a minority within the population. Now, that's what I learned from genetics. But what I learned from social science, I remember the colleague here during the first day, he asked, if this is a STEM problem, if this is a social science problem, if this is a humanity problem, and I say, it's the three. So what I learned from social science, I learned something very interesting that might help every one of us. We humans make the decision based on 3 levels of understanding. There are other theories, there are other hypotheses, but there are 3 levels of understanding. First of all, we look for patterns. That's very important. That's very important for our survival. We look for patterns. Snow in winter, cold and warm. We can harvest. We can whatever. From the beginning, we look for patterns. And those patterns were very important for our existence. Then, the second level, we look for others. We're social. Now, the others, mostly, all the time, were based on the same patterns. Remember, I'm sure there are people here that never, ever have seen snow before. And I'm sure there are people in this university that never, ever seen the ocean. And those are big events on nature. So they have different patterns. They understand nature different. So the second level is we try to get together, group together, based on those patterns. And the third one, which for me is the most important, we look for people that provide meaning to those patterns. And that's the important part of all this. Universities, scientists, religious leaders, and community leaders are the ones that provide meanings to those patterns. So, we have a great challenge ahead. We have to convince people that patterns are changing. We have to give meaning to those patterns. And remember, those patterns have been on Earth for 10,000 years, Holocene. Now we're moving to the Anthropocene, I think is what it's called. So we have to give new meanings to all patterns. And that's very, very important. Now, I think in order to put theory into practice, I have some recommendations, if you want to call it. We have to be bilingual. We have to be able to communicate to the policymakers, but at the same time, we have to be leaders to communicate to the stakeholder, to the common people. And that's required to be bilingual. Number two, we have to be empathic. I think that's the word. We have to avoid the cold facts of science, of data. Science can be cold. We have graph, we got data, we got number. Oh, this is the best we can do. We have to be careful because at the end, and this is very important, I didn't hear it in the whole meeting, we are here to diminish human suffering, and that cannot be measured. And number three, which is more important, we have to be aware of leaders whose goal is to maintain previous and obsolete patterns that avoid moving forward. And I hope this is my lecture. It's not 50 minutes. So I hope you got some of it. Thanks.
I never thought that when I would sit here in the third day and I would look that way, I would still see so many friends sitting around the table, still enjoying and still dreaming and scheming. But here we are. We have been concentrating in this 2.5 days on the enormous amount of knowledge organized around this room. And certainly it is amazing to be able to be a part of that organization. But as we set out to spend these days together, we took that challenge knowing that we were searching for paradigmatic change. So in a certain way, deep inside, I really don't want you to be really comfortable today in your seat. I would like for you to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Not with what is visible and apparent, but with what has been invisible and silent. As we look forward at the formation of this network, as we look forward already, and I hear rumblings around the room about 2020, we always need to be looking at the next one. Where is it going to be? How many are coming? What would we be doing? So many things are in the agenda of silence that I would like to take some time to bring them up. One main concept I would like for us to think this afternoon is on the concept of ignorance. And I do it not because I want to lecture, but I really want to lower the levels of it as we set out to build this network. Lower the amount of ignorance as we move forward with this network. So, what is the definition of ignorance? Some say that ignorance is not knowing what you don't know. It is that precarious position you're put in where the boundaries of the knowledge you have organized have taken you to the limit. And you don't even know what questions you need to ask to set forth a pathway to the unknown. Now, people that study ignorance say that there are two aspects to it, two main aspects. There can be ignorance in the sense of the absence of something. The absence of something, or it can be there can be ignorance in terms of the invisibility of something. If you think about it that way, you can then start to see ways in which ignorance doesn't necessarily need to be bad. As we move forward to build this platform, there's certainly ignorance in this room about the needs, about the values, attitudes, and beliefs of communities that are living with disasters right now and that are perhaps canaries in the mine for extreme weather events. Now, how do we lower our ignorance about their condition? I think RISE as a platform and us, those colleagues, friends, and now those who have been involved in this relationship building process have the responsibility to look at our regions and look at the pockets of ignorance that still remain in our own backyards. But we need not be naive to think that ignorance just occurs naturally or just exists naturally. I come from an archipelago, a colony of the United States, where ignorance has for many, many years been manufactured, culturally produced to maintain power distributions, to maintain status, to maintain inequality and injustice. So, as I want to become a part of this network, it is my job and responsibility to work in building counter narratives, to work in presenting you with scenarios, stories, and the proper information so that the platform understands that when they come down to Puerto Rico, some of the ignorance you're going to find in the island is not naturally occurring. It's produced by organizations like political parties, by unequal distributions of power that work around gender, race, ethnicity, levels of education, political affiliation. If I told you that you will find that in every corner of the US, would you believe me? That there is culturally produced ignorance in every corner of this country? If you do, then this afternoon you understand the severity and the extreme need for us to be sincere in our desire to produce a platform that's really looking for community resilience. If we are really putting our money where our mouth is, one of the first things we need to make a commitment to is to lower the levels of culturally produced ignorance about the vulnerabilities that exist in our communities. I think that if we are sincere on that main spot, we can move forward with knowledge, technology, science, empathy, and and relationship building, and all of the tools that we can then use to actually build a great foundation.
Thank you. One of my responsibilities with this panel is to be the time tyrant. So what I'm going to do is jump ahead, because I do want to allow our colleagues to ask any questions they may have. So let me just jump ahead in my list of questions. Clearly, whenever there is a disaster, there is an outpouring of concern and engagement, and people come to the process that wouldn't ordinarily be engaged. Unfortunately, once the news cycle goes through, there is that period of disengagement. So we do have an opportunity, though, in conferences like this, to inspire new research and come up with creative, potentially creative solutions. What would you, as experts, recommend can be done to sustain and maintain the momentum we currently have, and to leverage the collective power that has been brought to bear on this issue by RISE?
I don't mind opening on that one. One of the things we need to do a really good job, and in a way we can help structure this, and I'll put my planner, real estate kind of hat on, is through creating spaces of social infrastructure. And these are, modern planning, modern development really pushes away from a lot of this, right? And these are things like, somebody a while ago mentioned, Putnam's bowling alone, which has been used quite a bit, right? It is this breakdown of the social infrastructure. And we have to maintain that, but we have to create spaces through that. So some work I just did on local first organizations, for instance, as a form of economic resiliency, right? But when you buy local, you create spaces, bookstores where people want to hang out and so forth. And these create bonds, right? It's the YMCA, it's the bottom of basement of the church where people come in and play bingo and all these kind of things that creates that, right? And you look at, I can think back about the heat waves in Chicago, 10 years ago or so. People weren't dying because of the heat. People were dying because they were scared to open their windows, right? They were scared of the community in which they lived. And that, when you create the social infrastructure, we have to go back to the ground, as Cecilia and both Jose kind of pointed out, and look at how we establish that. Before we can really talk about real change, we have to start thinking about social equity, economic equity. We have to think about these terms and how we create spaces for that, right? And as a planner, I can think in those terms and say, here is how we can create parks in these situations that allow that to happen, because it's those people that are looking at each other to see if a snowstorm comes and says, is Ethel down the street, is she okay, to check in, right? And you help to build it through that, and that is how you can maintain this. And that is the great question, is how do you maintain this up kind of stroke afterwards? And for somebody like myself who lived through Katrina, evacuated with a dog, a Jeep, and a duffel bag, the first community that really came back in New Orleans was the Vietnamese community. They were very tight, a very tight-knit community. They were the first to really come back. So it's opening those veins to allow people to kind of discuss things and interact and not kind of close them down.
And I'll tag on to that. As we're talking about social infrastructure, there's a few people that are actually or groups that are actually missing from this conversation. I'm not an academic affairs person, even though I'm a professor and I do teach classes. I'm from the Division of Student Affairs at my university. That's who mobilizes immediately whenever something like this happens. It's not the academic affairs, because you guys know how long it takes to get IRB or whatever it is you need to do and where you're going to get the money. But the Division of Student Affairs can. And are there any other Division of Student Affairs people here? Okay, excellent. Because I was like, where are my people? Because I think it's really important, as we're talking about the capillary effect that Cecilio has mentioned, is that there's more capillaries out there than we realize. The differently abled. We've mentioned the indigenous communities a couple of times, but not really in depth when we're talking about this. What about the differently abled? Because this type of conversation impacts them in a very different way that it impacts us as academics or whatever our governmental agencies. So we need to talk about them as well. And don't forget our K through 12, because one of our first questions that David had actually given us is what brought us to this place, like this place right now. And I would tell you it's those 65 posters that are out there. Can you believe that we had 65 posters from students submitted for this conference? That is freaking amazing, and they're beautiful. And those young people need to be applauded, not just with money, but the fact that they took a step forward and they wanted their voice heard, and that's the way that they can have their voice heard. And we need to take the time to pay attention to that. And our 5-year-olds, they know more about some things than we know about them. Just give them your phone. Just give them your phone. And technologically, I love technology. I support technology, but we are so connected technologically, we're disconnected as human beings. I come to you as a human being, and that's where and how I made it to this place.
I wonder if I could pick up on that point. I'd like to build on Corey's point by saying that I think she's absolutely right. If we listen to the voice of the next generation of our students, I spent time in Sweden, very proud of Greta Thunberg, who's captured the imagination of the world with her concern about the existential threats that we're facing. Here at UAlbany, we had an experiment with launching a College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity. And I was hired to be a part of a boutique program. The plan was 200 majors in 5 years. We're about just a bit over 3.5 years in or so. We have 600 majors in emergency preparedness, homeland security, and cybersecurity. Our students are interested in learning about these threats, in participating in programs that are formed by disciplinary excellence, but also work across silos. So if we listen to the voices of the next generation, that will help. Second point is, after the last disaster, the urgency tends to dissipate. Certainly that's been the historical pattern. But I can say, somebody who's been in this field for 30 years, they seem to be coming closer and closer. And each time we're tempted to be distracted, there's another one. And if we take that global perspective that I was talking about, they're happening on a daily basis. And I think that will help to mobilize interest. Then finally, we need to institutionalize our fora and our meeting places. Thinking about RISE 2020 and 2021 and 2022 will, of course, help us to work towards those meetings and think about what we can do together to make a difference.
I would like to continue that. I usually tell my students that why we repeat the same error over and over and over again. And I bring this story, and I think you remember that. Do you remember the Titanic? When the Titanic was sinking, there was a group of people playing. There was a famous player. And I think all of us are becoming those players. The boat is sinking, and we still haven't realized that the boat is sinking. So every time we see an iceberg, everybody try to, help and bring. But when the iceberg is gone, we go back to the same story. So I don't think people have noticed still the pattern. We are in a transition between a major change and a big change. So even science cannot agree. Even science cannot agree. The points have different models. Like I heard yesterday with hurricane forecast, the Navy, European, giving different information. So I think there's still a sense of everything will come back to normal. What's normal? The previous pattern.
So, one paradigmatic change, let's concentrate a little bit on ignorance and learn about it, learn how to use it, how to recognize it and fight it in ways that are productive. Another paradigmatic change that I think would help this platform move forward has to do with the way we are organized right now. And I'm not going to talk about disciplines themselves. I'm going to go deeper into the kind of relevance that our organization has on our outcomes and on saving lives. Can somebody tell me here what the definition of Puerto Rican studies is? Okay, I'm going to go slower. Can somebody tell me in a few words what is the meaning of Puerto Rican studies? Let me go back, let me backcast then. Okay. I am a political scientist. I teach at the University of Puerto Rico. Let me ask a different question. Am I a Puerto Rican studies scholar? Yes. Is everybody in agreement with that? Yes? That's what I thought. That's what I thought. We still have major divisions, major lines cutting across knowledge. At no point in time did that become more evident as after Maria. I would argue, as a resident of Puerto Rico that is a political scientist and born in El Sagrado Corazón in Santurce, that I saw a movement that for a moment tried to erase a gray line existent between Puerto Rican studies and people that study Puerto Rico, that live in Puerto Rico. That line became so erased after Maria that it allowed for academics, I hope on both sides, to reflect on the historical development of that line. Should it still exist? Should we reconsider what Puerto Rican studies is? Not to erase is enormous amount of knowledge created across the years for Puerto Ricans in the United States. But for now to reconsider it in an expansive way in terms of the interconnection of that body of knowledge with studying Puerto Rico. There is an interconnection there that I think the RISE platform is ready to accept with all of its debate, with all of its complexity. And it would be a paradigmatic change and an example for other cross-disciplinary debates. Because for us, now we know that it's a matter of life and death. To be able to boundary span that line, or to be able to perhaps erase it at some points, or to be able to, I don't know, maybe make it disappear. I throw that challenge here because I am in this setting. If I was in Madison, Wisconsin, I would not be saying this. But I have so many thanks to give to my colleagues in Puerto Rican studies and to the diaspora in general, that it's not possible for me to encompass it in words. At the same time, I see this as an excellent opportunity for a new interconnection that's already happening. You can feel it happening. At least you can feel it in Puerto Rico when el Centro de Estudios Puertorriqueños holds an activity in conjunction with the School of Planning at the UPR. Or when you have an artistic event that helps bridge that line between the Bronx and Santurce. Mark said it better first. The debt owed to the diaspora after Maria is unpayable. It's unpayable. So it's not about paying it back. It's about how can we re-envision the relationship up to now to make it even stronger and help us be more resilient by changing that paradigm. So that's my second.
Thank you. We are just about out of time, so before I get hauled off the stage like they do at the Apollo Theater with the hook, and out of respect to the rest of the program, I wanted to thank our panelists and just make one quick observation. When I was a young graduate student at Columbia, I had the privilege of meeting Fred Friendly. For those of you that don't know Fred Friendly, he was the executive producer of CBS News, and one of the people he worked with was a gentleman called Edward R. Murrow. Fred was an interesting guy, and I got a chance to know him quite well. And he made a statement which I think is particularly relevant for this panel and for this conference. In a speech he was given, he was referring to journalism, and he said, "Our job is not to make up anyone's mind, but rather to make the agony of decision-making so intense you can only escape by thinking." I want to thank this panel for forcing us to think, the organizers of the conference for forcing us to think, and I hope it's as agonizing a prospect as it is for me. Thank you for being here today.
Whatever this is, left. The rest of our program up until we adjourn for the day, for the week, is the report outs of the cohort discussions. We've all talked about what's next. Jacob Manns, my colleague who led the design of the cohort discussions, will take us through that next part of our program. So Jacob.
Thank you. I would like to, okay, yeah, I'll slide on. I wanted to invite the representatives from the different cohort groups to come up. And we're gonna, I think we can just be sitting up here. It's gonna be a little bit informal, so. So I think one of the really important things about this conference and this, the portion that we're about to talk about, the cohort workshops, is that RISE is at a very interesting spot. I think a lot of the conversations, at least in the cohort that I was working with, which was with administrators, was centering around what RISE actually was. We're trying to define mission statements, we're establishing goals, we're thinking about ways to achieve those goals, and clearly I think for all of us, RISE is still at a very interesting spot, right on the edge, I think, of becoming something very solid. But since we're still in this moment, we wanted to, of course, give everybody in the room a chance to share their vision for what RISE could be. We, for those of you who weren't here when we introduced this, who didn't have a chance to participate in the different cohort workshops, we had 4 different groups. A group centered on practitioners and researchers, a group centered on students, a group centered on communities, governance groups and indigenous communities, and a group centered on administrators. And over the course of the last 3 days, we've tried to structure a set of conversations whereby representatives from these different sectors could share with us their vision for what RISE could be, their mission statement, and they worked together to craft that, as well as to establish a set of projects or policies or behavioral changes that they would enact within their own groups to actually see that mission realized. And then today we've been working on ways of measuring the impact of these different visions. What are the things that we are going to report back on? How do we know if we're being successful or unsuccessful so that we can improve as we move forward? So each of the different cohorts in the next 40 minutes or so, half hour, are going to spend a little bit of time kind of talking through what they established as that mission statement, identifying some key projects that they wanted to see, RISE, pursue moving forward, and then talk to us a little bit about what they feel are the key metrics that we use to evaluate our success moving forward. So just hold with us for a few more minutes as we get all of the reports loaded onto computer. We've been kind of feverishly finishing them up during the last couple of presentations. We just finished the cohort workshops about an hour ago, so it should just be a few more minutes. Yeah, it's okay.
Was trying to envision and discuss what RISE can mean for students. I would like to first start by thanking Sandra Soto Santiago and Glorinero Ojeda, which were our student cohort facilitators. They had to fly out to Puerto Rico and Arizona, so I'm their representative today. During the student cohort session, we follow a dialogue process in which students went from individual reflections to small group discussions. After those discussions, students collectively negotiated the final outcome for each deliverable. During the first day, we were working on a mission statement, and the mission statement is as follows. RISE promotes an open transdisciplinary network amplifying students' voices in allocating university resources for the following: validating and integrating participatory community-centered research to promote sustainability and resilience to disasters and crises. Hope, justice, information, ideas, and new perspectives on how do we approach climate change. During the second day, our main question was, what do we need to do? I'm gonna be reading a list that we developed as a cohort focused on forms to support actions divided into students across the different universities. So what is needed from research or community work? Well, first, develop a glossary of terms to be able to understand the meaning of these terms for each discipline, because we all come from different backgrounds and we want to have a common understanding of what resilience or power, all these different terms mean for us. Develop the RISE network in terms of relationship building, connections, and identifying institutional champions that can facilitate support and actions from their institutions. Emphasize community university partnerships, engage in activism, recognize our privileges, and foster using said power towards justice. Create a database with all the collaborating institutions, the impact, contact, and people and support that they can offer. In terms of individual supports for students in RISE, well, we first started by discussing services for displaced students. For example, establish a system of financial support, which can involve tuition waivers, housing, food, and related. Provide language supports for students who are not bilingual, and as has it been previously discussed, only 10% of people in Puerto Rico speak English, so if it were, for example, in Puerto Rico, we would need help with bilingual. Not everybody is bilingual. And importantly, identify mentors in host institutions. As the list demonstrates, the bulk of the work currently lies in developing these forms of support and carrying out the actions required before disasters so that afterwards this can be implemented. Lastly, today we were discussing how do we measure it. So for this, students discussed the system that is needed to be implemented in each institution to provide the support and the form of assessment or metrics required to measure the success. We did it through individual student support. We think that a good idea would be have regional RISE advisors to connect to institutions that are part of RISE in that region. Each institution will facilitate the data collection. It is important to have both qualitative and quantitative data to be able to also document the experiences of the students. This also requires data facilitation that is accessible to anyone who does not have knowledge in data analysis. Lastly, from the research, university, and community perspective, utilizing the database in order to deposit and analyze data on projects that are focused on serving learning in each institution. Creating a listserv or social platform that helps organize documents the work that it is being conducted. This will also serve as a way to measure engagement. And lastly, design a system to record and document service with a common structure that can be able to be tracked, crossed, and evaluated. Thank you.
That was amazing. I have a couple of visuals that, okay. Would someone else like to go? Oh, do you want to?
Report back
Okay.
on the administrators component. Even though you can't see it, I'll just read some of the things that we've been discussing. So I'll start by reading the mission. Oh, sorry. Okay. So I'll start by reading the mission statement that we established. Our mission statement is to connect universities and to create a transdisciplinary, transorganizational, trans-institutional, and transnational collaboratory that provides a destination to deliver new paradigms of interactions and collaborations for higher education, to provide a platform where students, faculty, and administrators work with the communities they serve on all dimensions of sustainability and resilience, and to ensure that universities rise above opportunistic research and toward long-term sustainable futures. I want to make just a few comments on this. I think as RISE, and these are some of the conversations that were reflected during the workshop, trying to find ways of being a little bit more specific in our mission statements as we refine what RISE is, I think is really important. I want to go through and kind of read through some of the goals that we identified. So key to achieving this mission statement, to provide a shared repository of best practices, lessons learned, and case studies. Goal number 2 that we identified, to facilitate a deeper understanding of the communities that we engage. Goal number 3, to increase the value and incorporation of local knowledge in academic research, teaching, and learning. Goal number 4, to better organize university response efforts and university research with communities impacted by disasters, i.e. to make universities more effective. Goal number 5, to establish pre-disaster agreements that allow universities to respond faster and with greater efficiency to community partners, students, and faculty. And then we had 2 kind of broader goals that encompass, I think, everything that was listed above, but to seek social justice and social change, and to minimize climate casualties at large. So I don't have time to read through all the different ideas that were identified to achieve these different goals, but I do want to read through a few of them. I think a few conversations that cross different cohorts and that cross different groups within the room. One of the key things is identifying this research repository, a place where we can access all of our knowledge, a place where we can not only collect but peer review and provide certainty that the research that we're sharing, not only with each other but with our communities, is of a quality and it's dependable and actionable. Another piece that I think was really powerful was a whole kind of series of projects that centered around local and community knowledge. So we look to identify projects that focus on the documentation of local stories and projects, and through this to gather and distribute local knowledge, as well as to create a repository of contacts on the ground that allow us to facilitate this research quicker and more effectively. And then to find ways of establishing projects that transform institutional knowledge into best practices, and to incorporate feedback loops into these best practices that allow it to be reflective of community experiences. So they're dynamic and they change over time as we learn. And that these best practices are made available through our repository to everybody, not just to academics, but also to the communities we share and to the public at large, an open source network. I think one of the last kind of project ideas that I wanted to share that came out of the conversation was this idea of regional RISE hubs. So we're looking kind of immediately to try and establish an initial network of university partners to help foster this RISE idea. And within that to create a RISE liaison at participating institutions that would be an interface between the RISE network and the RISE communities, or in the local communities rather. And this person would hold local knowledge, would maintain local relationships, and would kind of overall be considered a good neighbor within this kind of collaboration. I want to look a little bit and kind of close up here real quick and just talk about a few of the metrics attached to both the repository and this idea of the cohort. So within the repository, establishing metrics for content quality, so finding ways of establishing vetting processes that include, both peer and community review processes, and then looking at establishing a couple of different content types immediately. So accepting, obviously, content-based research, but also projects and reports on community knowledge transfer. Some design aspects that we thought we would consider, looking at whatever the interface of this platform would be dynamic, that there would be an ease of use so that people from different orientations could easily use the platform, and that the aesthetics of it were such that it would kind of inspire extended use. We would also look to create impact indicators that are both quantitative and qualitative. So we might be able to evaluate the success of our network by number of publications or number of transactions that happened across the network, but as well find ways of qualitatively evaluating it based on its impact. And then just a few thoughts on the RISE hubs and the RISE liaisons. These would maintain lists of local needs and would find ways of connecting external resources to local issues, would also maintain a list of local experts and connect these experts to the larger RISE network. This could potentially be articulated through a set of tiers or phases, so not every single regional RISE hub would have to be the same, would have to be the same scale, have the same investment, or kind of expect to live for the same duration, but are flexible based on specific regions and specific contexts. And we would, of course, evaluate these based on number, how many people, communities, institutions would be involved, and try to find ways of also evaluating it based on its connectivity. So that's what I have. Thank you.
All right, so I'll give a brief report out from the practitioner and researcher working group. We created kind of a visual schematic, which we'll be able to share with folks later. Really, the overarching principle guiding the mission that we kind of collectively came together around focuses on the transformation from theory to practice and our role working together, transforming universities to do collaborative, usable research to address disaster management challenges, climate change vulnerability, and systemic injustices. Cool, so we have the images now, so I can click through and get to see them that way. Awesome. Transition over here. Okay. So this overarching component of theory to practice, another key component is the idea of co-design of research and action in collaboration with communities and the integration of diverse types of knowledge and diverse stakeholders in the process. Another foundation is the holistic systems approach across all the phases of disaster management and embedded within any work on disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation to address equity and power dynamics. And a theme that we kept coming back to that's so important is we really want to resist the tendency to want to reinvent the wheel and to really function as a network of networks connecting important work that's already underway. So the goal of coordination, taking stock of resources that exist and the gaps, and collectively learning together. So from there, this led us to identifying some sort of action items or action goals around defining governance structures for the network that are engage diverse stakeholders and have diverse input. Identifying some legal frameworks that guide disaster response activities and creating trainings and resources for researchers and community members to understand legal issues embedded in their work and to identify opportunities for advocacy for legal change for more effective disaster management and response. And working together to have key operational systems in place that will sustain the network. This actually parallels a lot of what some of the other groups have identified with a vision for RISE fellows who are trained as a cohort and work at their institutions and their communities to educate others, to work collaboratively and share lessons in their work. And so we identified this as having several directions or areas for fellows who are researchers, who are student-led, and the idea of student association chapters based at universities. The idea of engagement, training, and education through other forms of community institutions, including K through 12, K through 16 institutions. And connected to this is the idea of building capacity of local leaders, programs that connect people who are local leaders with resources and access to political power to be more impactful and effective in their leadership. identifying ethical principles to guide research and action within this community, and coming together to develop a data directory that would unite existing repositories of data and information and resources. So connected to all of these things, we identified some specific metrics today. I won't get into the details of these, we can discuss later, because I just want to show you the incredible dynamic conversations and team that we had coming together to work together. So thanks for everything over the last few days.
Ready for us, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm going to pull you up.
Yeah, we're not going to get to that first. First, we want to do something else. So, hi, my name is Mark Lichtenstein. I'm one of the facilitators for our group, which Oscar's going to explain to you. But before we do that, could you raise your hand in the audience if you were involved in our awesome cohort? Take a look at the number of people that are still here from our cohort. And Javier, right there, just Javier, put your hand up. One of our great note takers, and we had some other students that were awesome that had to leave. But Oscar, co-facilitator with me, did a fantastic job from UPR Mayaguez, and is going to lead us through the discussion of what we did in our cohort.
Thank you all for the opportunity firsthand, right? And it's going to be a hard follow-up with that presentation, but I'll do my best. So,
The faculty members, they have all the resources.
I just want to take a moment to acknowledge, right, these are the logos from the universities and research institutions, but not the federal and communities that are here present. And following up on what Mark said, I just want to recognize your presence and thank you for being here. Could you follow up? So recognizing that the mission statement, the theory of change, and the indicators and criteria in our cohort were deeply intertwined, we kind of simplified it into elements for RISE, which are going to be established here in this white presentation, more simple presentation. So first, and I'm going to sound a little bit redundant because the different cohorts managed to touch the same points. And so the first one is, how can RISE be a knowledge of network of be a knowledge of network of trusted voices and a source and resource of information, research, and analyst complexity, right? And as the colleague stated, be a clearinghouse or repository of information that welcomes and values different perspectives, is inclusive, equitable, with a focus on social justice and diversity, and has the particular attention to break down the barriers and reduce fragmentation. And with that, have some set of ethical requirements that respect local populations and don't trample the most vulnerable communities. Also, RISE from our cohort was seen as a third-party validator and policy changer that should be recognized by different federal agencies and help function as a red team or B team, models like the CDC use, that could aid congressional and other legislators in taking whatever policy is being developed and breaking it down and providing constructive criticism. And likewise, be a watchdog of the allocation of resources, making sure that when disaster strikes and we got to respond, all the funding really ends up where it's supposed to end up. Next, well, we see RISE as a convener and coordinator platform / repository, that provides forums, mediation, and capacity building. One thing that was mentioned a lot was not reinventing the wheel, so we have to do a landscape characterization of what already exists, different models on the federal and state and local communities, so we know what specific niche is not being attended, so RISE could fulfill that gap. And with this, establish a baseline of common understanding which we could use to redefine resiliency. Throughout this process of RISE, we should take in consideration and augment the process and frameworks by including communities and indigenous people before, during, and after developing policy, and take into deep consideration what they are contributing, recognizing their sovereignty and self-determination. And as Anais mentioned, also provide a platform of opportunities, funding opportunities, to implement research, effective research on the disaster cycles. This means all the stages of pre, post disaster. RISE should also have a research and organizational coordination unit for it to be an effective repository of information, meaning we have to have delegates that have this specific task in analyzing all the information that is available and actually punctualizing what is missing and what is not, and being having the repository, a web portal. It could also be an app that functions offline, because when disaster strikes, Wi-Fi is very hard to come by, that could access the information and link to where this information is actually coming from. And we have a lot of examples that the colleagues from the federal agencies mentioned. They're on the notes. We're gonna digest them, and we also touch upon the points of local convergent hubs. Have a regional hubs that could provide immediate and effective attention to the local populations. And so I think that's it. Thank you.
So we're going to take all the information that we gathered over the last 3 days, and we're going to be working, in our kind of cohort leadership capacity to condense that down, and that will be a portion of the final report for the conference, and will be made available to all of you, and of course made available to the people who are helping to kind of turn RISE into an operational structure. So we're super happy that everybody's participated in these different cohort functions. And we look forward to seeing how that information gets operationalized over the next year. Thank you.
So when Liz wasn't tweeting, she was also leading our cohort discussion, as you can see. So thank you very much, Jacob. Thank you to all the cohort leaders, and thank you to everybody who made such amazing contributions to those cohort activities. It's my pleasure to bring us to our closing session. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's not my pleasure to bring us to our closing session, but we are at the closing session, and it's my pleasure to introduce two individuals. We'll have them up here one at a time to talk with you. And they're here to talk with you from the perspectives of the two leading institutions who brought you all together here today. Certainly the University at Albany and the National Center for Science and the Environment. And so we'll hear first from someone that you've already had the opportunity to hear great ideas from, great thoughts from at yesterday's luncheon keynote, Valerie Luzatis, who is, when you join me, Valerie? Valerie is the incoming chair of the NCSC Board of Directors. So my sense is she's going to be reading a lot of the report out materials. Valerie.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you to everyone for here. This is the first I've seen this room from this perspective today, and I have to say, I join Cecilio in saying, wow. I've been to a lot of meetings, maybe not so many that had this many hours in every day packed with things that we've done. What an amazing thing to see so many people still here. It's really a testament to the passion that this group has, and I'm glad to be part of it. It's been amazing. So on behalf of the National Council for Science and Environment, I want to thank all of you. And thank once again the University of Albany. Really, really appreciate the opportunity and the ability to be able to host a meeting like this. It's really important. I want to thank all the sponsors. All of us are here from very many institutions. This wouldn't have happened without all of the sponsors as well. And to the steering committee, who put in a lot of time and effort with the whole group as well to make this happen. And for every single person in this room, because we wouldn't be doing this without every one of you. So I have two bits that I would like to share in closing. The first is a set of words that have arisen in my mind for the RISE acronym that emerged over the last few days. And it's not I'm not going to come up with this is what the 4 words should be, but what I have is a set of R words, a set of I words, a set of S words, and a set of E words that have emerged over these last few days as I've wandered through and participated with and built so many relationships. So that's the first R word, relationship. Re-envisioning, radiant, restorative, rewarding, respectful. I words, impactful, imaginative, illuminating, inclusive, and impassioned. S words, sustenance, secure, successful, stimulating, and still. E words, empathy, equity, embracing, ethical, and finally extraordinary. And these are words that emerged to me as we went through these few days, and I'm sure that you all have many others to add to this. And finally, following on an idea that was seeded last evening by President Velisa Rocho, I want everyone to just take a minute now, and as you're saying your goodbyes and you're thinking about the end of the program, and think about and articulate to yourself one thing that you can do as you leave here to advance the RISE concept and to help to build the network. You might even want to write it down. But even if you don't write it down, I would encourage you to say it to somebody on your way out of the room as we all say goodbye here today, as a way of anchoring what it is that we've done here today and how each of us can help to move that forward as we go ahead. So again, on behalf of the National Council of Science and Environment, I want to wish everyone a good trip home, and I wish you all good health, much happiness, and joy every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Because this is the first time, I believe, that the provost here at the University at Albany has talked to you since you've been here, I'm going to give a little bit of background, a little bit of bio information. So Carol Kim is the Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs here at the University at Albany. She joined us since 2019, and since then has really been a significant force in thinking about strategic issues facing us here at UAlbany, I'm sure facing all of you, enrollment, and how do we navigate going forward? How do we become resilient with respect to those ideas? Before coming to the University at Albany, Dr. Kim came to us from the University of Maine system, where she served in a number of academic and administrative roles, most recently as Associate Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, Innovations, and Partnerships. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Kim. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So after months of planning and preparation, after 3 days of intense, meaningful, and inspiring conversation, after deliberations from more than 400 leaders and experts, including more than 100 universities, colleges, and 70 government, business, and nonprofit organizations, RISE 2019 is drawing to a close. Since Sunday, we've had 55 sessions involving keynote addresses, plenary panels, armchair discussions, panel and cohort talks, which included more than 100 PowerPoint presentations. Students submitted 65 posters, which led to over 3,500 votes for best design. And they were beautiful posters. They're just gorgeous. Most importantly, however, RISE 2019 generated critical discussion, explored today's most pressing challenges, and framed a number of opportunities and new paradigms to help enable higher education to contribute more effectively to building a resilient global community. During RISE 2019, we probed new ideas and concepts, as well as innovative ways of thinking that promise to transform the deliberations of the conference into a new framework, one that will capitalize on the breadth and excellence of our institutions of higher education. Some have raised concerns during the conference that as the memory of the last disasters fade, we will forget and return to business as usual. While it is now more than 2 years after the landfall of Hurricane Maria, the participants in the RISE 2019 conference, the accelerating RISE movement, and the growing RISE network have clearly not forgotten. Our charge to you is to go forward, energized, connected, and empowered, and make a difference. In closing, there's so many people to thank for making the RISE 2019 conference a reality. Our sponsors, with a special thank you to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and Coastal Resilience Center for their support and generosity. Our lead partner, the National Council for Science and Environment, including Executive Director Michelle Wyman and NCS Senior Fellows and RISE Program Co-Chairs Marla Perez Lugo and Cecilio Ortiz Garcia. The extraordinary leadership and support of our honorary co-chairs, SUNY Chancellor Christina Johnson, CUNY Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez, and UPR President Jorge Haddock. But for their remarkable support along with their institutions, the reach of RISE 2019 conference would not have been realized. The phenomenal leadership and expertise of our honorary and steering committee, comprised over 25 institutions, also needs to be thanked, and the more than 180 faculty and practitioners who share their insights and knowledge at RISE 2019. And last but not least, the many staff from across the University at Albany, particularly those in the divisions of research, university events, campus center, facilities, and media and marketing, catering, information technology service, among others. Allow me to close with a quote from our SUNY Chancellor, Christina Johnson, at the opening event at the RISE conference. What will happen after the conference? How each of us answers this question will determine the impact of the RISE network. I couldn't agree more. On behalf of UAlbany, President Avedon Rodriguez, thank you for being a part of the RISE National Conference and spending the last 3 days with us here at the University of Albany. We look forward to collaborating with you as we collectively strive to deepen the resilience of communities most threatened by climate-related disasters. Thank you once again for your participation in RISE 2019. We very much look forward to partnering with you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you.